sheet shortly. So we're good on my end.
Great. We'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. My name is Allison McKenzie, and I am the chair of the Historic Conservation Board. I would like to take a minute to remind everyone about the rules of this proceeding. The proceeding is at all times governed by the rules of procedure adopted by the board on September 26, 2011, amended March 23rd, 2015, last amended March 9th, 2020. A copy of the rules of procedure is available for review online. All those planning to testify today, which does not include those solely making arguments such as attorneys, should stand and take an oath administered by the board's attorney. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. As such, the board reserves the right to deliberate in private. The Ohio rules of evidence do not apply to this hearing. However, professional rules of conduct do apply, and candor to the tribunal is required. The board members are citizen volunteers and are not paid for their service. They are treated as public officials under Ohio law. Any attempt to influence them, including but not limited to bribery, intimidation, retaliation, which may include contacting their employer in an attempt to exert influence, is punishable as a crime. All should be aware that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please speak clearly into your microphone and state your name and address for the record. In the event of any technical difficulties with the video conferencing technology, I may continue or postpone this hearing at my discretion. All participants providing testimony must have both camera and audio features turned on in order to participate. With that said, let's proceed with the first item. Mr. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 1 is an application for a certificate of appropriateness at 2968 Anwood Street in the East Walnut Hills Historic District. This is an existing non-contributing building that was built in 2004, and the current proposal is to construct a new covered porch addition on the south side of the existing structure. The porch is approximately 19 feet wide by 30 feet deep, has a roof with a masonry fireplace centered on the south elevation, and it will be clad in brick with a metal roof. So as a non-contributing building, staff does feel that the proposed design of the porch is compatible with the existing building as well as the surrounding district, and has no issues with the proposed placement, setbacks, design, or any other aspect of the proposed addition. So staff does recommend the Historic Conservation Board take the following actions based on plans by May Architecture dated 4/12/23. Approve a certificate of appropriateness for the addition and changes to the south elevation of 2968 Anwood Street, with the condition that the building permits be issued within 2 years of the decision date or the COA shall expire.
Thank you. Just got the list, so give me 1 second. It looks like we do have the applicant, Ms. Susan May, on the line. Would you like to add anything that Doug did not include? If so, we will get you sworn in.
No, I think Doug covered everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do not have anyone else signed up. Does the board have any questions for the applicant or staff?
No.
Hearing no questions, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the COA as laid out by staff.
Second,
I'll call the roll. Ms. Smith?
yes.
Mr. Weiss, I see his camera. I'm not sure if he might have stepped away for a moment. So we'll pass him. Mr. Sunderman?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Zelasco?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Congratulations. Looks like you are good to proceed with your permitted project.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to item number 2, Mr. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 2 is an application for a certificate of appropriateness for 830 Main Street in the Main Street Historic District. This is the Second National Bank building along Main Street, and the applicant is proposing the demolition of a small side addition on the building. You can see on the screen, the red box is the location of that proposed addition. It is a addition that was built after the construction of the original building, but still within the period of significance for the district. We don't have a specific date, but the Sanborn maps indicate that it was in place by at least 1930. You can see on the screen, the 1922 Sanborn Fire Insurance map shows no addition there. The 1904 map that was corrected to 1930 shows it in place by that point in time. So the current building is being converted into residential use. And with that conversion, this small side addition is no longer needed. It formerly housed mechanical equipment for the larger building and has been mothballed for many years. So the proposal is to currently remove that addition to the ground level and extend a fire escape along that same elevation from the top floor to grade in order to provide the required secondary egress for the residential units. So as the building is within the period of significance, the applicant has submitted information that basically states that the addition does meet the demolition guidelines for a non-significant portion of a building that will not adversely affect the parts of the building which are significant as determined by the HCB. And also it will not impact the streetscape of Main Street as it is set back on the rear, as far back on that south elevation as can be from the street, with a surface parking lot located between that addition and the street. So while it does have visibility, it is not a significant portion of the building, and its demolition will not affect the streetscape. Staff agrees with this argument. And as such, we do recommend the board take the following actions based on plans submitted by Novo Development Group LLC and Elevar Design Group dated 2/14/2023. Approve a certificate of appropriateness for 830 Main Street per the submitted plans, including any revisions submitted for permit subject to staff review and approval, with the condition that the building permits must be issued within 2 years of the decision date or the COA shall expire.
Thank you. We do have some applicants signed up for this matter. Looks like Mr. Burka, Mr. Hill, Mr. Mormon. Would any of you like to add anything to Mr. Owen's report? If so, we will get you sworn in.
This is Tony Burkla. Not at this time for me.
Okay. Anyone else who is an applicant on this case? Not? Do any board members have questions for either the applicant or staff? I do not have any other community members checked in. Cassandra, is that still the case? I had a couple on the list, but not checked in.
Correct, they did not arrive.
Perfect. With that being said, I will entertain a motion if there are no questions from the board.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the certificate of appropriateness for 830 Main Street as laid out by staff.
Second that.
Thank you. I'll call the roll. Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Sunderman,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Zalasko.
I am abstaining.
Okay, there's Mr. Voss. Looking through all my windows, Mr. Voss.
I abstain.
The chair votes aye. That should be a passage. So thank you. And we will move on to item number 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness at 2343 Auburn Avenue in the Auburn Avenue Historic District. The applicant is proposing a changeable copy electronic message center as a ground sign at the corner of this property. Pull up the drawings here. So there was previously an existing ground sign on this property at the same location. It was an externally illuminated static ground sign. You can see at the corner of the property where it was formerly located. And in the image provided by the applicant, you can see the existing brick piers that held the former ground sign at this location. So the applicant is proposing to reuse those existing brick piers and place the new changeable copy sign in between, in place of the former ground sign that was at this location. So there's no zoning relief required for this project. It just needs the certificate of appropriateness. However, staff does have concerns with this proposal, as the Auburn Avenue guidelines on signage encourage signs to be compatible with the surrounding district. It does allow ground signs to be placed. However, it does say that the sign should be sized or located in such a way as to not obstruct views of the district's contributing buildings. And also it does strongly discourage internally illuminated signage. So staff feels that based on the guidelines, the proposed electronic message center is not compatible with the district, as internal illuminated signs are strongly discouraged, and it does have the potential to distract from the surrounding historic resources. So the applicant has stated that there are few contributing buildings in a 250-foot radius of this specific site for the ground sign. However, it is located in the front yard of certainly a contributing building. And with the nature of an electronic message center, these ground signs are not only internally illuminated, but they are also much busier than a typical internally illuminated ground sign. So with changing the ability to change messages every 10 seconds and the possibility of adding other graphics on the sign, it does take the eye away from the surrounding resources. And it's the intention of electronic message center to draw your attention to that sign rather than the surrounding area, so that you pay attention to the messaging that's placed on the sign. So the applicant has also pointed to several other internally illuminated ground signs that are in the district. Some of these signs were in place prior to the district going into effect. Other signs were placed after the district went into effect, but the majority of those ground signs are for Christ Hospital, which is a bit of a different property in terms of the use. It is a 24-hour operated facility, and effective signage is necessary for a public health and safety reason in order to direct people that are going to the hospital to the proper place that they need to be. It is a very large campus, and effective identification signage is very important to the functioning of the hospital. So staff does not feel that is a direct comparison. And it should also be noted that Christ Hospital does not have any electronic message centers or other changeable copy signs. So staff does not feel that the proposal meets the conservation guidelines and would not be in the interest of historic preservation, as it would directly take emphasis away from the historic resources in the district. So with that being said, staff recommends the Historic Conservation Board take the following actions based on plans by Hampton Architects LLC dated 3/15/2023 to deny a certificate of appropriateness for 2343 Auburn Avenue. And I'd also like to read the findings in on this one, that the property owner has not demonstrated by credible evidence that the proposal substantially conforms to the applicable conservation guidelines. and that an electronic message center sign at the southeast corner of the property is not a simple or compatible ground sign and has the potential to draw attention away from the historic resources of the district.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. We do have some, an applicant and an owner signed up on this project, Steve Hampton and Randy Strunk. If either of you would like to add to what Mr. Owen has mentioned, please let me know and we will get you sworn in.
Yes, both of us, please.
Okay,
Okay. If you could both take yourselves off of mute and raise your right hand. I need you to answer out loud. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
okay. Who would like to go first?
I'll go ahead and go first, then I'll let Randy talk about what the Icron's mission and what they do at this facility. So thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. So yeah, this is obviously kind of a unique situation. Again, I'll let Randy talk about the programs that they provide at Icron, but in short, it's a nonprofit that serves the needs of the community through a variety of programs, a pretty wide variety of programs. And they serve pretty much the entire city. And, you know, one of the things that they need to do is to be helpful to the community, is to be able to share all the programs that are available, and a static sign is not compatible with that. And I'll let Randy talk to the breadth of that. Specifically to kind of some of the design concerns. Yes, this is certainly a very prominent house. It's a great old historic mansion that's been in office for quite a number of decades at this point. You know, what we're proposing, we feel is compatible. It's no larger, the sign is no larger than what was there. You know, we actually feel that this sign, you know, one option would be to have mostly a static sign and a smaller scrolling sign that could have on those programs. We felt that having one electronic board is actually less busy than having something moving, because you could have all the text that you need, stay there, and then change on a relatively slow basis, whether it's 10 seconds. If we'd like to go even something slower, we're very open to adjusting the parameters of what that looks like. You know, we do not have any intent of doing any animations or anything like that, no flashing text, anything like that. We literally just need to be able to change the copy on the text to share all those programs. And, you know, this site, there really is no inauspicious location. Again, we'd be open to moving it from its historic location where it was at for quite a few decades, possibly further north on the street. But again, when you look at the site, right around us, there is, you know, certainly we want to be respectful of the gorgeous, you know, architecture of the building that we have, but we've got directly to the south, a non-contributing, a vacant parking lot. To the east, across the street, there are quite a few large parking lots and non-contributing buildings. It's not blocking a major chunk of the historic view of any part of the neighborhood. Again, the sign is kept low to the ground because of the grade change. Yeah, it's up a little higher. There's a historic stone wall, and so it sits a little higher than the street, but we're keeping it within about 3 or 4 feet of ground level. And so, you know, in totality of where it sits, it does not provide you know, a very large obstruction in the neighborhood at all. Again, the key would be, you know, limiting the programming, and, you know, I know there are restrictions in zoning code on sound and different things that are enforced outside of the built code. And we'd be happy to have whatever provisions on brightness levels of reducing that at night, or even after certain hours, turning the display off. Again, no, basically static images only, and only having text on that sign. I would like Randy to talk about the variety of programs that Icron offers, and the breadth of resources they provide the community, which this sign will help share with the community, and you know, hopefully give more people more resources that they need. So Randy, would you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, our agency's been around for a long time, and the name Icron is probably not really, doesn't resonate with a lot of people what type of services we do. So having a sign out there with just our name does not seem like it would be able to support our role in the community there in Mount Auburn. We have a lot of services that we provide to youth and adults that include vocational services, employment services, educational services, wellness services, health services, behavioral health services, counseling support, all different types of peer and wellness services that we also provide. And it's an agency that is similar to other agencies there in the community. The local mental health and recovery services board is across the street. The recovery center, who serves similar populations, across the street. And they provide one type of service, but we provide multiple services, and one static sign is not going to be able to let the community know what we do. We do serve a lot of individuals there in the community. Having a sign that would be able to adjust, and as Steve said, not that frequently, but to adjust to let the people know when maybe our programming changes, or individuals that other opportunities come up, or we could offer services to individuals in the community. I think would be a great benefit to the youth that are walking up and down the street, adults that could understand exactly what we provide to the community.
Thanks, Randy. So again, basically the fact that this sign is for a nonprofit that serves the community, we feel that that's very important, and that the changeable copy sign, the electronic sign, in the use that we would use it as, would be compatible with the district and not take away from the architecture of the building.
And I feel the sign, I don't know if I saw the sign flashed up there for other members to see. Seems like the colors, the same shape of a sign that was there before, no larger, fits in with the district there. And as Steve shared, parking lots are really surrounding our south side and some of our east side. So it's not really taking away from any of the beauty of the district there. And in addition, we do offer services 24/7, 365 days a year that would be compatible. Again, we're not Christ Hospital, but we do serve and have the potential to serve a lot of people there in the Mount Auburn area.
Are there questions from the board members for either the applicants or staff?
I have a question for Mr. Struck. When you say this sign, you're going to change it, and you said you wouldn't be changing it that much. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about you have one message for one day and a different message the next day, or are we talking about message changes over the course of a day?
I would say one day, a message change each day would be a lot for us. I think being able to change the message at least weekly would be great. We'd be open to that, but not throughout the day. We don't want some type of flashing signs, but just a message, a scrolling message once a day that would say, here's this group that's offered tonight for community members, or here's this educational service that is coming next week. If you would like to sign up, please give us a call. So I think we could help a lot of community members there if we were able to, again, let the community know what type of services we provide. So no, it wouldn't be a lot of changes during the day.
I'll comment for the board. You guys do great work, and it's sorely needed. Unfortunately, my position is self-illuminated signs are just inappropriate for historic districts. There's a lot that can go wrong there. So I think you need to find another way to get this members vote to change your message.
Is there anything, sir, that like you said, you are familiar with us, that knowing the services we provide, that would allow us to let the community know what we do. We don't feel a large sign listing every service that we have I think that sort of sticks out like a sore thumb there in the community. So having something small that's there now, comparable with that, with just an ability to market seems like most appropriate, but I'd be open to your thoughts.
Right, yeah, I don't know that I have a solution for you. I appreciate the dilemma. And given the circumstances, though, because it is a historic district, and that's just, I think I've been pretty consistent on that in the past.
Thank you.
I would also add that I'm concerned of the precedent that this could set. Suddenly Christ Hospital wants scrolling message boards and additional information and signage opportunities that, again, I think that could be a concern moving forward. Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
I just want to, Madam Chair, I just want to say that I agree in that sentiment. I mean, in my prior life as a zoning administrator for other municipalities, we come across this often. And looking at the Auburn Avenue corridor, there's plenty of other operations that offer a variety of different services as well. And I'm concerned that we're going to kind of open a hole in the existing guidelines.
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well, Madam Chair. I just don't want us to set a precedent of putting an electronic sign in a historic district. Although Icron, I mean, my daughters had to use their services before, so I get it, and they do provide a valuable service, but I just don't want to open that Pandora's box.
Yeah, I think that they have to find a different way than what they're asking for here. I make a motion that we deny the certificate of appropriateness.
And second.
I will call the roll. Ms. Smith? Ms. Smith, I think you muted yourself before speaking.
I did. Yeah, aye.
Mr. Weiss?
Yes.
Mr. Sunderman?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Zelasco?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So unfortunately, I don't think we've provided you with any answers other than to maybe go back to the drawing board. So wish you luck in finding a solution to get your message out there.
All right, thank you.
Okay, item number 4.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an application for 446 Milton Street. It is an application for a certificate of appropriateness as well as zoning relief. It is located in the Prospect Hill Historic District, and it is also in a hillside overlay. The proposal is for new infill construction. A COA was approved previously on this property in 2021 for the demolition of the existing building on the site. And a condition of that demolition was that an HCB approval of the proposed infill development be received prior to the issuance of the wrecking permit. So the original building is still standing, and the applicant has now developed their plans for the infill construction that would replace that building. As it is within the hillside district, zoning relief is required in the form of a hillside review to allow a height exceeding the maximum building envelope by approximately 5 feet at the midpoint of the rear roof slope. And obviously for new infill construction, a COA is also required. So the applicant has been working with staff on different iterations of the new construction, and they have substantially revised their plans from the initial proposal. So you can see the proposed front elevation on the screen currently. This is the site plan showing the existing building, which is set back substantially from the street at about 44 feet. This is what was previously approved for demolition. So the applicant is proposing the new construction to be pushed forward towards the front street. So you can see the site plan here. The building is at the front lot line. the projecting bay on the front would extend into the right of way, which would require approval from the Department of Transportation and Engineering. It has minor setbacks on each side of the building, and the rear of the property will, the existing house, once it is demolished, it will be seeded and strawed. The existing stone retaining walls on the rear portion of the building are proposed to be left intact, and they will be reviewed by a civil engineer to make sure that they are still sound during construction activities. So as far as the building design goes, in the staff report, there's a diagram showing the maximum building envelope for the hillside overlay. This is a 35-foot height at the front and the rear, and those two lines are connected. So you can see the setback fourth story does extend over the 35-foot height limit. So that is the hillside relief that is required. As far as the design is concerned, when viewed from the front streets, it does have a three-story facade at the front with the fourth story setback. The applicant has also added additional brick material to the side of the building, which is primarily extends back to where that fourth floor begins. So that was suggested by staff in order to have more of that brick material visible. Since it does have such a small setback on each side, those sides aren't going to be highly visible. So staff feels that that brick return on the side elevation is enough to convey the more quality materials when viewed from the street. Excuse me. Staff does have some concerns with the front facade of the building, primarily as related to the projecting bay and its cladding with the fiber cement material. However, staff does feel that it substantially conforms to the guidelines, and in both of its use of materials with the brick on the primary plane of the facade, punch double hung window openings on that same plane, and then even with the large projecting bay, it does still maintain the rhythm and emphasis that is required by the guidelines. So staff does feel there are a couple modifications that could be made to make this more compatible. As far as the front facade, the ground floor has a large 2-car garage door opening. At ground level, staff would recommend that this 2-car garage be separated into 2 single-car openings. There are many buildings on the street that do have garage openings on the ground floor along Milton. However, they are almost entirely single-car garage openings. So staff feels that separating this would increase the compatibility and also make the front design of the building more pleasing and more in place when viewed from the front, as it would break up this large opening into 2 smaller openings and presumably provide more brick material on that front and between the 2 bays. Staff has also recommended that the glass railing, which forms the top composition of the building, as it has no cornice or overhanging eaves. This glass rail basically forms that strong top composition. So staff had recommended to staff that where typically we do prefer glass railings to be transparent, in this case, I believe it does make sense to have a tinted glass or some other kind of opaque treatment, excuse me, to that glass material. So it's not specifically called out as being tinted on the plans, which is why I've included that as a condition, but I do believe that is the intention. So overall, staff does feel that the project does substantially conform to the conservation guidelines. So we do make the following recommendation that the Historic Conservation Board approve the hillside review to allow a height exceeding the maximum building envelope by approximately 5 feet. And that staff approve the certificate of appropriateness for 446 Milton Street, including any revisions subject to staff review, with the conditions that the 2-car garage door shall be separated into 2 single-car garage openings, that the glass rail at the parapet shall be tinted or frosted, that if the Department of Transportation and Engineering does not approve the proposed encroachment at the front lot line, staff may approve shifting the building back on the site to allow the projection to be entirely contained within the property boundaries, and that the building permits must be issued within 2 years of the decision date or the COA shall expire. And I also did want to mention that we did have a couple of letters of opposition come in later on this project. They came in just after the deadline. So I did not address those letters in the staff report, but they were included in the packet as a supplemental submission.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. We do have an applicant and an owner signed up, Notice Papademus and Maya Carter. If either of you would like to add anything, let's get you sworn in, please. Would you
Mr.
like to add-
Papademus?
There we go. Yes.
I do. Do you solemnly, Mr. Papademus, do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
What would you like to add?
First of all, Douglas, thank you so much for the presentation. Everything we have been through this for a while now. A lot of little changes, but I have reviewed everything with the owner and the realtor, and also with I had a couple of talks with the neighbors on either side of the building, and everything that Doug has recommended. Everything seems totally appropriate. The only one item that I would like to change, to alter a little bit, is item C about the transportation, Department of Transportation, that we're no longer going to have the building exceeding the property line. So it's going to be the whole building, including the cantilever option, is going to be behind the property line. Outside of that, the 2-car garage, it's totally appropriate. Visually continuation from the street, especially with the rest of the neighbors, it would be totally appropriate. The glass rail, we try to show it as a little bit tinted, frosted, so we don't see beyond. The picture didn't do it justice, but that is the intent. And I think anything else that anyone would like to ask me at this point, I'm here to address anything that you guys might have.
Thank you. We do have a few neighbors signed up. Before I proceed to their testimony, does the board have any questions for either staff or the applicant?
So you can get the 2 doors to work in there. It didn't look like there was you can do the 7-foot garage doors. How's that work?
As of now, we had a 16, so we'll just on either side of it, we'll make it a little bit wider, try to fit 1 foot in between, just enough for a little bit of a structure.
Okay, great. The only other question I guess, I didn't see a final grading plan for the site. I heard the comment about the building would be raised, but but I couldn't find that grading plan in any place. Is there, can somebody comment on what it would look like behind the building, elevation wise?
So we met with a Civil Solutions, the civil engineer for our building, but also a lot of the other buildings in the neighborhood. Their recommendation after we visited the site was to, let's say, proceed and leave the footprint of the older home as it was up there, mostly so we don't disturb anything on either side of our building. But the most important, to don't disturb that back really tall stone retaining wall that holds the upper street. So as far as the final grading on the backside, it's a little bit premature for me to tell you exactly how it will be, especially because of the condition of the current foundation. We'll try the best that we can, especially with the civil solution group to be there on site every time to not disturb or rearrange much. How that exactly will take place is a little bit on a day-to-day basis. We have a couple of good size retaining walls, especially if you're looking at our home from the front. The building on the left-hand side of it has a really good stone retaining wall that we would like to keep, especially for those owners' sake. Just because it looks good, it's a little bit historic, and but mostly provides good stability to all the soil that has been there for all those years. So we don't want to alter, manipulate, or we'll try to massage a little bit what we can, but not take out what is already there.
I appreciate your comments. So the other building, and maybe I missed it, did it have a basement? So when you say the building's going to be gone, is that?
It's
if it was a basement, that's one direction. If it didn't have a basement, that's another direction.
It is a basement because of the way the slope is, and I don't have the demo drawings of the previous building, but the way it was built, it is considered to be a basement just because of the grade it was. Yes.
I'd feel a lot better if there actually was a final grading plan in the back. That's the only comment I have. Otherwise I'm pretty on board with your solution.
If it's any justification there, however the grade is right now from all the way back towards the front of the existing building that is going to be demoed, that is not going to be altered. So everything is going to be really backfilled, so it can provide a kind of additional support to what is already there.
Sure.
And the retaining wall of our build, and the rear wall of our building is going to act a little bit as an extra retaining wall support for what is to become of the new building.
Given it is in the Hillside District, I think.
Yeah.
My recommendation, I don't know how the rest of the board feels about this, but maybe we could table this and you could come back with a solution, a proposed solution, but what would happen in back, because it's just too ambiguous for me right now.
So
Mr. Owen, did you want to comment on that? Is there something I'm missing in the reports or?
No, I don't have any more specific information. Typically, when a wrecking permit is issued, the backfilling of the existing hole in a Hillside District will be reviewed by building plan examination to ensure there are no issues along with their geotechnical report. But yeah, we did not have a full grading plan as proposed.
And the building department will rely on our appraisal of the Hillside District though. So at least that's been my experience in the past.
Well, the building department does generally have they conduct their own review based on the geotechnical report. The
Sure.
Hillside review from a zoning standpoint is to ensure, basic stability and to ensure that a geotechnical report is either complete or we have at least a preliminary geotechnical report. But, the full, more complete review is not conducted through zoning.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for applicant or staff right now? Otherwise, I will move on to testimony from other concerned parties. Okay, I'll go down the list that I have in order. Looks like our first person signed up is Sean Keller. If you would like to speak, please unmute and we'll get you sworn in.
Mr. Keller, if you could raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
What would you
I just had a quick question relative to if you're looking at the new structure, there's a retaining wall on the right-hand side. Could someone comment, I guess for the record, that retaining wall will stay? It essentially holds up my backyard.
Retaining wall.
I think most of that retaining wall is on the property of 446. But a very small portion of it is actually on my property, 450.
446. May I ask you which retaining wall are you referring to? Is it the one in the front or towards the back?
It's in the back of the property. It would be towards the back of the property on the right-hand side if you're facing the front of the new structure.
Past those steps?
Yes. It goes from, I would say, it starts pretty close to the back end of 448 and goes all the way to the city maintained retaining wall that holds up Bowl.
So anything behind the property on the 448, our new building is not going to go past that.
Okay. So can you assure me that that retaining wall will be undisturbed, I guess?
I cannot take the liability. However, the civil engineer who was on site with us and they reviewed the rear wall, the left-hand side wall, and the right-hand side wall, they said that they will be on the site all the time to monitor during demo, but also during new construction. As far as the guarantee, I cannot say anything on that. I can consult with the civil engineer and also the structural engineer who we have on site, that they will be on site, and I can see what they can say. But me
Okay.
personally, I cannot.
I just
cannot-
noticed that you made a comment about the left side stone wall, but not the right. So I just wanted to make sure that,
Yeah, and I'm sorry. The only reason I did was because when myself and the civil engineer were on the site and we met with both neighbors, the Steve, the owner of the right-hand side property, addressed a couple of concerns for the rear wall. I'm sorry, it was just on the right-hand side. Steve and his wife on the left-hand side, they addressed mostly the concern that they had on the common kind of a retaining wall that we had. So we walked that all the way back. And
Okay.
the recommendation from the civil engineer was to not touch anything and infill. So we didn't proceed anything more additional or more in depth with just on your property.
So
If that's something,
Just for clarity's sake on this and to end the dialogue and back and forth, are there any retaining walls that you are planning to modify or remove as part of your project?
we are not. The only one that unfortunately, since this project started, the only one that fell due to a tree is the front. And that was the front, about the 4.5 feet existing stone retaining wall that was ended up getting kind of a destroyed because the tree fell on it. Outside of that, the rest of the walls we have no intent of touching at all, especially because the owner would like to keep them there, but mostly because of the character, the historic view, and exactly what it looks like. I mean, it's really good looking old retaining wall. There's no need.
Mr. Owen, are you aware of the portion that they plan to remove?
I believe notice is are you referring to the wall along the front property line?
That is the only wall that fell because of the tree, correct?
Right, and that is proposed to be removed as the building is proposed to be built to the front with that garage as well.
Okay, so you were aware of that in the application.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll move on to the next person signed up, Joshua Lycus. I probably butchered that. I apologize. If you would like to speak, let's get you sworn in.
Yeah, if you could unmute, Josh. And did you want to add something?
No, I was ready to take the oath.
Okay, yeah, if you could raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I did.
Okay, what would you like to add?
First, to clarify, the retaining wall was removed. Started to demo, so that was removed completely. The tree had nothing to do with any of the front retaining wall. The back right, as Steve's concern is his retaining wall, our retaining wall behind 448 is connected to that retaining wall. And like Nada said, it shouldn't be affected, but in front of that, there is a stairwell, concrete stairwell that abuts our property. And that is a major concern for us. The engineer, basically what I took from it was we're going to start chopping away at it and then we'll see what happens. Sorry, still there? Okay. So that was our concern. We also had concerns that the property was too far forward in relation to everything west on the street. It limits our plans for this property in the future, as well as we're going to be, because we are very small, if not maybe the smallest house on the block. We're a small 2-floor carriage house. With both sides now, we're going to have two large structures right up against on either side. So we're concerned about that. And now I'm hearing that the garage doors should be split into two single, which I agree with. But then the solution I just heard was to possibly widen the property, which would further encroach on what we want, which is the maximum easement between the two properties in case we need maintenance. Since our property is 132 years old, the base walls and the side walls, they have shown some aging, and we want to make sure we can get people back there. So,
You, Mr.
May I
Nevins,
reply? Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
please reply to the extent of are you proposing widening the property from what it is shown in the current submission?
No, that they might have been a little misunderstanding. They will divide the garage doors, but the footprint, we're not going to change at all. The footprint is going to remain exactly the way it is. The only thing that we'll do is actually, as of now, we had the home to be straight flush with the Jazz home next door. But after talking a little bit with Doug and ODOT, we decided that yes, we're going to set it back a little bit, a couple of feet back. So even the front projection is not any further than Jazz home next door. As far as the retaining wall in the front, I was maybe I misheard that. I thought the tree had fallen on the front retaining wall. That's why I just said that. I didn't know it was demolished.
It fell on our house. It saved the retaining wall.
Oh, Jazz, I'm sorry, I didn't.
That was before, which was I was concerned about what was happening to that wall. Obviously, the design negates any of that problem.
Okay.
Okay. We will move on to the next person signed up, Heidi Upchurch. If you would like to add something, please unmute and we'll get you sworn in.
Ms. Upchurch, if you could unmute.
Nothing to add for me.
Okay. Moving on to Steve Elmer. If you'd like to add anything, please unmute and we'll swear you in.
Yes, please.
You could raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please add what you would like to.
I just have a couple of concerns similar to what have been discussed. One is what was mentioned is if you face the front of the house, there's a rear retaining wall on the left that I don't know what's on the other side of the wall with regards to behind the existing structure. It looks to be part of the existing structure, but that maintenance or keeping that there is quite important to us. It's one of the reasons we actually bought in the historic district, you know, those old retaining walls, and it adds tremendous enjoyment to our current property. And I think the removal of that would just not be great for the area. It could the street, the wall's been there for probably 150 or so years, not to mention not knowing what's behind it. I don't know if that goes back to the grading question that was brought up earlier, but kind of the unaware what could be there once they start coming in and tearing down without actually having looked at that to verify. Almost goes back to what Josh said. If they're just going to start removing stuff or doing things and see what happens. I don't get that impression necessarily, but that is a concern, especially because I don't know that they've looked behind that wall to see what's on the other side. Secondly, I'm a little concerned about the height of the house. We have some windows that face the side of the new structure that are rather high up on our house. And I think, if the house goes 5 feet above what's there, it's going to tower over ours and just completely block in any natural light, as well as just, stick up higher than any other structure on the street. Those are kind of our two biggest issues. I'm speaking on behalf of Heidi and I, but we live at 444 Milton.
Thank you. I believe that's all of the folks that I have signed up for this item. Are there any questions or comments from the board members?
I have a question. I'm a little confused. As I walk up and down that street, all the houses, there is a gap between the houses, space. And is there going to be a space between this house and each of their neighbors?
Yes, on between the house, our house, and the house on the right-hand side, it's going to be 3 feet of space. And it's going to be about 3 foot, maybe 3'1", between our house and the house on the left-hand side.
Oh, okay. You said something that I thought you were talking about encroaching over when you were talking about the garage, but okay, I'm good.
Okay.
Are there additional questions or comments from the board?
Yeah,
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to ask, is there any aspect of this house that's, aside from retaining walls, that are buttressing the retaining walls? Are they in contact with the retaining walls, the existing houses to be demoed?
Would you mind repeating your question?
Yes. So I'm asking, the existing house that's there right now, is there any aspect of that house that is part of the retaining wall, or is it all separated from the retaining walls on the property?
If we look in the home from the front, the left-hand side is a part of the foundation of the retaining wall is part of the foundation and crawl space combination of the home that we're thinking of, that we're about to demolish. However, we're not going to be taking out any of those walls. Instead, we're going to be keeping them front, back, and rear, sides, front, back, and they're going to be infill per whatever the civil engineer is going to let us know.
Okay.
I have to parrot what Mr. Zelasco said. There are a lot of projects where I'm comfortable saying that there are unknowns that we're going to have to address as we go through. But given the nature of the hillside, not understanding how that back area is being addressed gives me a good deal of concern.
Would if the board is open to it, would the owner or you, Mr. Papadopoulos, be open to coming back with a more defined solution in the back? I would have to deny it based on, I'm just not comfortable with, I mean, I kind of was a little trite in saying, does it have a basement or not? I saw the photographs, I saw your cross sections, and I understand that. It's just how that all ends up working its out grade wise. I would like a clearer picture of that before I throw my approval out there.
May I ask you if So if we have the civil solutions, which is the civil engineer for the project, give us a cut section of the site, is that what is going to help?
Could you repeat that again, please? I'm sorry.
Yes, if the civil solutions, which is the civil engineer for the project, give us a side section between the upper retaining wall through the demo house, through the brand new house we're going to be building, and give us a little bit idea of how they're going to infill the basement crawl space of the demo house. Is that going to be sufficient enough, or we need something more than this?
Well, a cross section only is just that. It's just a cross section. It doesn't really explain the nuances of all the corners and the adjacencies of the property and that. So I would say, no, just a proposed plan grading plan is pretty much all what I'm asking for.
Okay. And just to make sure, the existing grade that is there right now with the house, we're not altering that. I just wanted to make sure of that the front to back, we're not altering any of the existing grade.
Well, then the plan would reflect that.
Yeah. And
no, I recognize that, as you dig into this, things may change and you may need to make adjustments, and that's few things are set in stone in this world, but I just think a clearer picture for me is going to be needed. So Madam Chair, would you like me to offer a motion? So I move that we table this for 30 days and let the owner and the designer come back with a grading plan.
Second.
I will call the roll. Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Sunderman,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Zelasco,
Aye.
Mr. Voss.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, so please work with staff to get this back on the docket with some additional information on grading.
thank you all so much for the feedback. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item number 5.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 5 is an application for certificate of appropriateness and zoning relief for 311 Mulberry Street, which is located in the Over the Rhine Historic District. The application is for new infill construction on an existing vacant lot. So this, the lot is currently vacant with infill construction on one side and the Hughes Street steps on the other. This is a proposal for a single family dwelling. It is not in a hillside overlay, but it does require some zoning relief due to the existing lot conditions. And so the existing lot is fairly shallow compared to the surrounding properties, and it is relatively square in shape. So the applicant is proposing to fill the majority of that lot with the existing building. So as a result, there is a need for a dimensional variance for a rear yard setback of 20 feet for a proposed setback of 0. An application for a special exception for a front yard setback of 2.5 feet for the proposed 0 setback, and a dimensional variance for a proposed height of 36 feet, which is 1 foot above the 35-foot limit. So the applicant is proposing the building to be built to the lot line on the front, as well as one side and the rear. And there will be a 5-foot setback on the west. So the Building is 3 stories at the front facade. There will be a rooftop deck on the building, but it is set back towards the rear of the building. So the front will feature a primarily mechanical equipment and area for solar panels. The front facade at the ground level does feature 2 single car garage openings as well as a pedestrian door. And the building is clad with brick material in a stacked bond pattern, as well as columns or pilasters that will be clad in a zinc material. The side and rear elevations are clad in a fiber cement panel material that matches the floor plates for the proposed building. The rear of the building has much more glass, as it is not going to be visible from the street. On the front, the building does have a simple steel cornice proposed, which will also serve as the guardrail for the roof level. On the front, the side has a perforated metal panel that provides that guardrail for the roof deck area. So staff does have some concerns with the proposed design of the building. In general, the zoning relief appears to be fairly consistent with the surrounding architecture of the area where most buildings are built at or near the lot lines, and are built with similar heights. However, staff does have concerns with the primary facade. This is mainly related to the emphasis of the building, as well as the window openings that are proposed. So I think the main concern with this does result from the proposed window openings, which are not punched openings, and they do not have any defined surrounds as required by the guidelines. And they are all paired window openings on a residential building. So while paired openings are found in the district, they're typically found on commercial or industrial buildings and sometimes on mixed use buildings. However, in this area along Mulberry Street, it is entirely residential, and there are very few examples of paired window openings. Admittedly, there are few historic buildings left on this stretch of Mulberry. One historic building does have paired windows on the ground floor, but all the upper floors are punched single individual openings. So staff does have concerns with that aspect of the windows. The fact that they don't have the surrounds on them, they're not punched openings, and they are all paired windows, all contribute to a more horizontal emphasis on the building, which whereas this is a difficult building because the lot is fairly wide, wider than most lots around it. Staff feels that the paired windows and without any kind of surrounds or any significant detailing on that does help to actually accentuate that horizontalness of the building rather than the vertical. So there are design choices that were made that do try to create that verticality through both the pilasters that are provided in between all the window openings. However, staff feels that really the overall impact of these paired windows is creating a more horizontal emphasis, almost appearing more as ribbon windows across the front of the building. So staff also has concerns with the materiality. This is primary on the side elevations. The larger setback is provided on the right side of the building, whereas the left side of the building is occupied by the Hughes Street steps. So the open space to the left of the building will not be filled with any kind of new infill development because that is right of way for the steps. And with the 5 foot provided on the opposite side, it creates additional visibility of that fiber cement paneling on both elevations, but most significantly, on the left side where there is the wide opening. So when viewed from the east, coming down Mulberry Street, there will be expansive views of that large facade with very little relief and primarily that fiber cement cladding. So staff does feel that these are significant concerns that ultimately push the design beyond the level of substantial compliance. So for those reasons, staff is not able to recommend approval of the certificate of appropriateness. As I mentioned before, the zoning relief itself, staff does not feel is highly problematic as it does typically match the development patterns of the surrounding area. So with that said, staff does recommend the Historic Conservation Board take the following actions based on the drawings submitted by Terry Bowling, architect, dated 4/2023. Approve the dimensional variance of 20 feet for the proposed rear yard setback. Approve the special exception for the 0 front yard setback. Approve the dimensional variance of 1 foot for the proposed 36-foot height. And staff recommends denial of the certificate of appropriateness for a single-family residential building at 311 Mulberry Street, with the finding that the property owner has not demonstrated by credible evidence that the proposal substantially conforms to the applicable conservation guidelines, that the proposed window styles and configuration do not conform to the conservation guidelines as they are not punched openings, are all paired windows in a residential building, and accentuate a horizontal emphasis to the building, and that the fiber cement paneling on the side elevations will be highly visible from Mulberry Street and is not appropriate as a highly visible material.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. We do have the applicant, Mr. Bowling, signed up, as well as the owner, Mr. Vaughn. If either or both of you would like to add anything, please unmute and we will get you sworn in.
I would like to add something.
Mr. Bowling, if you could raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you, everyone. Just respectfully, a few points of clarification, perhaps. There are several things happening in the design that I just want to make sure are clear. This is a very carefully studied project. I've done several projects within the historic district, and I feel that all of them have corresponded to the guidelines, but perhaps added a bit of differentiation that I think is absolutely necessary in this beautiful city. I think we've got a lot of clones of clones, and so I take this project very seriously, and we really spent a lot of time thinking about how to achieve contemporary architecture in a historic context without bullying the adjacent buildings, so to speak. But a couple of things I want to just point out. I think the pilasters, the zinc columns, and the zinc profiles in between windows are meant to exaggerate the vertical conditions. When I look at the building, I don't see the horizontal banding that is called out but by Doug and the staff, because I see the windows as negatives. I see the windows as voids in this field of columns and vertical profiles. Regarding the cement fiberboard, this is used all over the Rhine, in many cases in principal facades. Just the last project that we saw had cement fiberboard on the principal facade. So I'm a little bit disoriented, I guess, about the lack of support for the cement fiberboard. It's a beautiful material that, again, we're not just plastering it up like siding, but we're following those profiles across the facade. So all of the modularity in the facade openings are reflected on the side elevations. Also, it's a less expensive material than brick a little bit, but more importantly, from a performance standpoint, it's really excellent because it allows for rain spring construction. I can put exterior insulation, whereas brick is a kind of it's an old fashioned material. I love brick, but I think when you're using it simply as a facade and as a veneer, it has limited appropriateness in all conditions. But this is the first time I've ever been denied by the historic board for over several projects. So I really want to work with you. I want to make sure that we can achieve, our mutual goals. So I'm all ears in terms of how we can kind of maintain the spirit of the building. And if there's some things that we could do to, get it back on course, I think that would be awesome. That's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board for the applicant or staff before I move into the public comment?
I did have a question, Madam Chair. Mr. Bowling, you answered the question about the rain screen. What is the joint material between the panels? Is that an open reveal, a third material? Is it caulked?
It's an open joint with a stud in the back with a black EPDM membrane. So it's very tight. It'll be, a quarter inch or so.
Okay.
So they're not giant joints. They don't really pronounce themselves, as big open joints or anything. They're pretty subtle.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Can I add one small thing? Doug also mentioned the stair on the side. That stair doesn't exist right now. So it is just an empty lot at the moment. I think it's a paper street, Doug, the Hughes. And I don't see that ever changing. I have a feeling it's going to remain that way, but the stairs do not exist presently on the site on the side.
Are there additional questions from the board at this time?
It's not a question, but it's a comment. The windows scream at me that they're not appropriate.
Why is that?
Just when I looked at the pictures that Doug just showed us, and I am completely going to own that I do not have an architect's eye, but I could see the horizontal, but I couldn't see the vertical.
I will add, as one of the architects on the board, I struggled to find the verticality in the flat elevation, but saw it much more apparently in the perspectives where you see that the windows kind of step back a little bit. I do have some concerns that it does read much more as a commercial building to me instead of a residential one, but I do think it's a very attractive building. So interested to hear what the other board members have to say. If there are any other questions at this time, we can do that. If not, I'll move into public comment and then we can have more discussion.
Carry on.
Okay, we will start in order of my list here with Conrad Cross. If you'd like to add something, please unmute and we'll swear you in.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
Yeah, Mr. Cross, if you could, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
What would you like to add?
Okay, mainly my concerns are on the height. I know they asked for a 1 foot variance, but I looked into the city land development code, and I mean, to me, and when I had to submit for a COA for my house, I had to draw 2 parallel vertical lines and connect those lines, and anything through that above 35 feet was what I requested for a variance. When I look on HS 200, I'm seeing an average height in the front of about 36 feet, an average height in the back, if measured from the patio, of almost 43 feet. So to me, that looks more like an 8 foot variance that would need to be requested. Looking into that, it says, let's see, for a flat roof surface, the building height is measured from the average grade to the mean height of the highest level of the roof. So that's even taking into consideration, that's not taking into consideration the parapet. So I think that they need to look at that. I just don't see where the 1 foot variance is coming looking at these drawings. I also have design concerns. I do think it looks pretty much like an office building and doesn't really fit in with the character on Mulberry Street, but I'm mainly concerned with the height because I'm right across the street. And you know, it's any foot of view that's blocked is going to negatively impact my views and possibly, you know, lower my property value. So
Mr. Owen, would you like to comment at all on how that measurement is done?
Yeah, I think the confusion is related to the fact that there is a hillside overlay boundary along Mulberry Street. The north side of the street is within the hillside district, but the south side of the street is not. So it is under regular zoning. So
Gotcha.
in the hillside overlay, the measurement is taken from the front and the rear, and that those lines are connected to form the parallelogram, like he mentioned. When you're not in the hillside overlay, the elevation is taken only from the front. So with this building at the front grade level to the top of the parapet, it's 36 feet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. Next person signed up is Claire Zimmerman. If you would like to add anything, please unmute and we'll get you sworn in.
I'm ready.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please add what you would like to.
Yeah, I don't have a ton else to add other than what Conrad added. We're at 312 Mulberry Street, so literally directly across the street. And our main concern is also the height variance. I know 1 foot doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're standing from our rooftop, you know, just as he said, that it blocks views and potentially affects property value. And then just to second the concerns around the designs, I do think it's a really cool looking building, but I don't think it really matches the character and charm of Mulberry Street. I do think that we have a conformity and a uniform look, but I don't think any of our houses look like clones. I think they all have their own beautiful uniqueness, but you know, still reflect the charm and uniformity of the street. That's it.
Mr. Thomas Murphy, if you'd like to add anything, please unmute and we'll swear you in.
All right, I believe I'm unmuted.
You
You can raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, what would you like to add?
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Really just similar things to Claire Zimmerman. I also live at 312 Mulberry Street, and I agree with Conrad and in general with the council. I would like to, I guess, testify against the height variance. Just as Conrad and Claire has stated, properties on the north side of Mulberry are kind of at the mercy of the properties on the south side of the building. These houses were properties were built with the you know, with our deck and the view of the skyline. Buildings on the south side, in theory, at 35 feet, but the view and the skyline, being on Mount Auburn here, is scarce and it's valuable to us. And any foot above that 35 feet regulation is going to be a possible obstruction of our view.
Thank you. Jacob Burnens, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No comment.
Okay. Those were all of the people that I had checked in and signed up for this issue. I will turn it back to the board for any additional questions or comments. I will also give Mr. Bowling an opportunity to respond if you would like to any of the neighborhood comments.
I did have one question for Mr. Bowling, but you have a illustration that shows an elevation of the street. All the other existing buildings are in color, and you chose, I think, to represent your building without color. Or I guess what I'm wondering is, would the color help with the verticality? I too struggle with the paired windows, and I think the building is beautiful. I'm just not convinced it's appropriate for that for that street. And I know recent designs have been more and more become more contemporary as architects look for ways to differentiate themselves for their clients. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence, actually. Be interested in what the rest of the board thinks.
No, I appreciate that comment, Bob. I mean, again, I think it's a question of interpretation. The windows themselves are very vertical. You know, they're almost a 2-to-1 ratio in some cases, just like the historic guidelines recommend. Also, the amount of opening per the area of the facade is also smack in the middle of what is required. So between 20 and 50% opening, I'm at 36%. So I don't feel that it's, you know, that we're asking for some kind of, you know, glass curtain wall system or something. It's just that it's north light. It's beautiful. We have high performance windows, you know, that are going to perform very well in all weather. And I think just getting that natural light in the house was the primary reason for doing the paired windows. And again, in my presentation to Doug and the staff, lots of examples of paired windows in historic architecture all over the city. I know that this particular block does not have those, but in this particular block, there are wildly variable approaches to, you know, the single family residences, as evidenced in the elevation view of the street. So I just, you know, this is a question of how you're reading it, you know, of course, but I feel that strongly that the project is making the best of the vertical emphasis through the addition of these components and trim and columns and vertical members. Now, there was something else I wanted to add about that. It just escaped me. But anyway, thank you.
Appreciate your comments.
I also have problems with the look of the building when you walk around there, and I would agree with Mr. Bowling that there's a lot of different types of architecture up there on Mulberry Street, but they all look like houses. And I have a little problem with this. I don't see the verticality. I see more horizontal. I understand that the view from across the street right now is real nice because it's a vacant lot. And that, you know, if you put anything in there, it's going to interfere with the view. But I'm wondering if is it necessary to have the, you know, you're asking for a variance, and is that necessary?
It's necessary for the quality of space on the interior. For example, the living area, we're trying to get a 10-foot ceiling. We've sacrificed 8-foot ceilings for the lower areas. But by the time you add a 3-story building up and then have the 36 inches required parapet for the roof deck, it adds up to 36. It wasn't a goal of ours to make a 36-foot building necessarily. It's just that the way that the structure and the mechanical systems worked out, you know, to build up the layer cake of a 3-story building with a roof deck. If we went, you know, we'd have to sacrifice the ceiling height, of course, in one of the upper floors, or the upper floor, because that's the only one with a decent level ceiling, but we'd have to sacrifice that. So yeah, it's a good question about whether it's necessary or not. It would certainly be much better for the owners.
I'm not sure whether my issue is the windows and the sense of verticality, the lack of essence that I see in the pilasters, or whether it is the uniformity of that cement fiber board as it's presented here. But I look at this and I'm not comfortable with the way this is being portrayed. And I think staff has it spot on that this is much more of a horizontal than vertical presentation. I think somebody else said it looks an awful lot like a office building. I think it looks like a dentist's office. And I don't think it comes, you know, certainly with new construction, there is some latitude, but it just reads as much more glass than the 36% that we're being told. And I certainly didn't calculate it, but this one is not there for me.
We have not had any comments regarding the fiber cement paneling on the side elevations. I do want to provide some feedback on that for the applicant, knowing that there may be a revision process here. I personally do not have any problems with the fiber cement paneling. I think it is well detailed and provides interest on those facades. Provides texture in a similar way that masonry would, in a more contemporary material. But I would also be interested in hearing other comments and perspectives from the board.
Well, again, coming back to what I was saying, I'm not philosophically opposed to the fiber cement either on the front or the sides. I just think, so to specifically answer the chair's question, the sides are not what is the hang up I have, and I probably could live with that. I think for me, it is the marriage of the material, the fiber cement on the front married to the windows that is giving it a different sense. And then sort of the insubstantiality of the pilasters that are trying to create that vertical plane. And so inherently, I don't mind the material. I just don't think it's working well with the windows the way they're laid out.
Yeah, if I can respond to that a bit, Tim. I'm trying to find a way around the problems that everyone seems to have with the facade. It's been pointed out by Doug in the report. It was referred to that these windows are not punched openings. Now, I don't find that language anywhere in the historic guidelines, but I understand what you guys are talking about. Would that make this project more acceptable if we went from the paired windows to, say, punched openings, as you would call them, in each of those bays? So reducing from a double to a single with a brick surround. In other words, there's a field of brick that instead of being banded would go up and down, the facade, the full 2 stories of above the garage. Do you think that would make a difference? I mean, that's something we would certainly be interested in pursuing as a design option, if you think that might help.
Are you proposing that each pair of windows is reduced by 16 inches in width? Is that what you're saying, Terry?
8 inches from either side, one brick. Again, off the top of my head here, whatever looks best, right? So if it has to be 12 inches, maybe we could do 12 inches. But I think if I were to frame the windows and reduce them from being doubles and made them singles, again, these are deeply recessed windows. The whole thing has almost, about 1.5 feet recess from front to back. So I think it would come across as being like a punched window if it were framed in brick. Yeah, I mean, that's the top of my head possibility, I guess, to
yeah.
From what
I
I'm
don't
hearing.
want to put us in the middle of trying to redesign, because unlike some of the other people on the board, I'm not an architect. So my first blush as I try to envision what you just suggested is that I'm not sure that really addresses my concern. But part of, and I may sound contradictory here, if you surround these windows with brick, so you're introducing, now you have the cement fiberboard, brick, glass. I would have to see how that looked. It doesn't seem.
There's no cement fiberboard.
I think that's just.
Yeah. It's all brick on the front, Tim.
Oh.
So the panels that you're reading are brick panels.
Oh, that's not the way I was saying it, and not what I read. So clearly I read something incorrect there. Okay.
The columns are zinc, Tim. The infill, all the windows is brick. It's on the sides where we're using the.
Okay.
Terry has the cement board.
Correct.
And on the south.
Well, then I'll shut up.
Yeah, I'm okay with the windows. I think you're pushing it, but I like the building. It's just. That's me.
All right.
I would have to see a new design. For the windows.
I would just, it's the fact that it's in black and white, it's tripping me out. I'm trying to figure out what would this look like in real life. Maybe there's a need for more spacing in the front, but I just can't get a sense that there's that definition of those windows between what we have here. So I'm uncertain.
Color would have helped on this one.
I'm sorry.
I said color would have helped on this one. In the presentation.
Are there any additional questions or comments? If not, I think we'll move to a motion and see kind of how this lands.
I actually have a question because I've never been through this process before where it has not been approved by the staff. So if you vote, then it's done. Is that right? And I have to start over from scratch if it doesn't get approved?
Well,
Madam Chair, if I may sort of run down some of his options right now.
Thank you.
Sure,
Or just the process.
you can probably do
Okay,
it
I'm sorry.
behind
Go ahead.
window.
Okay.
All
Okay.
yours.
Mr. Bowling, it appears that there is that there's some will here from the board to give you an opportunity to react to some of the feedback that you've received from them. And I think they'd be willing to offer up a motion to table this to allow you to do that. So that is, I believe, one option here. The other option is that you can ask the board to vote on the proposal or the application as proposed. If the board votes to deny the COA or the zoning relief, you can then appeal that decision to the Zoning Board of Appeals, who will take a look at the project as well and determine whether or not they agree with the Historic Conservation Board. Of course, there's always the chance too that a motion could carry that approves this, but once the board votes to either approve or deny this, or if they vote to deny this, then the only way that you could get this application approved as proposed is to go through the Zoning Board of Appeals. Hopefully that makes sense.
Sorry, I was muted. That makes sense. I think the most prudent thing to do would perhaps be to table it and discuss it with my client and have a conversation again with Doug as to how to get back on track. Because I'm sensing that I don't have enough support from the board. So I think if I'm reading that correctly, then I would choose to table it and work on the solution that might work better for the board.
Hearing that preference from the applicant, do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we table this for future consideration after the applicant has worked with staff.
Second.
I will call the roll. Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Sunderman,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Zelasco,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye as well. Hopefully we've provided some helpful feedback, at least a little bit of direction on where to go next.
Indeed. Thank you all for your patience. I appreciate it.
Okay, moving on to item number 6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness and zoning relief for 1947 Auburn in the Auburn Avenue Historic District. It's also located in a hillside overlay. This property has been before you previously. Back in November of 2020, the applicant had submitted a proposal for a garage addition and a brick privacy wall around the courtyard on the Auburn Avenue frontage of this building. At that point, it was tabled due to board concerns with the small setback between the building and the adjacent building and the size and location of the brick privacy wall around the courtyard. So the applicant at this point has submitted a new application for a similar proposal with a garage addition in a similar location, although with an increased setback. And the brick wall for the courtyard has been removed and replaced with a low landscape wall with a fence above, which has also been pushed back from that Auburn Avenue frontage. So the current proposal does require zoning relief in the form of a hillside review for a rear yard setback of 5 feet, which exceeds the maximum building envelope with a required 25-foot rear yard setback. And the proposal also requires a dimensional variance of 2.26 feet for a proposed fence and landscape wall height totaling 8.26 feet along Auburn Avenue in excess of the 6-foot limit. And finally, a dimensional variance of 45% for a proposed wall opacity of 95% along Walker Street in excess of the 50% limit. So the site plan is on the screen. Hopefully you can see that now. So the larger rectangular block on the west side of the site plan is the proposed carriage house addition. It will be connected through a covered breezeway to the main house, which is why it needs to meet the full 25-foot rear yard setback. The landscape wall is the lower line along Auburn Avenue. This will be a low landscape wall with landscaping planted in the void between that wall and the fence. And that upper line is the 6-foot semi-privacy fence. It will have slight visibility in between it. It's a horizontal board fence. You can see it's pushed back beyond the corner of the building, so it will not be directly up against the Auburn Avenue frontage like the previous brick wall was proposed. So you can see on this first floor plan a better view of the landscape wall, showing that landscaping that will be in front of the screen wall that's pushed back. And this is the elevation view showing that low landscape wall, the landscaping, and the 6-foot fence above. This is the proposed garage addition, which now has a 5-foot setback, which is increased by about 2.5 feet from the previous proposal. This gateway is pushed back further along the back corner of the house. As you can see here, it's along the back corner of the new garage. This will be a new privacy fence in the corner side yard. And then there also is a deck proposed on this elevation in which the existing door will be infilled. The paired window opening that currently exists will be enlarged to form the new entry to that deck. So, excuse me. That being said, staff does feel that the proposed zoning relief through the hillside review for the rear yard setback is generally appropriate. As it is a hillside review, it was not reviewed under the hillside standards. So staff finds that it does meet the standards for a hillside review. And furthermore, staff does feel that it is appropriate as far as a historic conservation standpoint. Auburn Avenue is this section of Auburn Avenue is composed primarily of row houses along this same side of the street. All of these row houses have very minimal, if any, setbacks. So you can see on the applicant's section view, this pattern continues down to the end of the historic district with buildings mostly connected, sometimes with a very small setback. By providing the additional, excuse me, 2.5 feet of the setback from the previous proposal for that 5-foot setback, there is over 6 feet in between the proposed addition and the new building. So considering the context of the streetscape, staff does feel that that small setback is appropriate in the interest of historic conservation. As far as the general design of the carriage house goes, staff also feels that this is appropriate as it is compatible with the existing building as well as the surrounding architecture. It is primarily brick with a shingle roof. There are dormers on the front as well as the rear, and it does have the decorative coins and lintels above the carriage doors. The doors are all separated into individual openings, individual single car openings. So it does give that a smaller scale when viewed from the street. So I'd also point out on the fencing, staff does not feel that this is inappropriate as the applicant has pushed this back, so it is behind the front line or this line of the main house structure, so it will not be as obvious when viewed from the street. It also has the landscaping placed above the landscape wall to help further screen that fence. So as a fence technically this is considered to be in the rear yard, as it does not extend past that front line of the house. So it is able to be 6 feet tall. With the additional height of the landscape wall, it does bring it up to 8.7 feet. But staff does feel that that is a better solution than the previous brick wall that extended to the lot line. As far as the fence on the Walker Street side, currently this whole area is an asphalt parking lot, which will be removed in order to create a new grassy yard area. So the 6-foot privacy fence, while technically in the corner side yard along Walker Street, it is substantially set back from that street about 25 feet, and it is also towards the top of the hill. So it will not have as major of an impact as a 6-foot privacy fence that was placed on the lot line as you're walking down the street. Its placement beginning at the deck addition will also ensure that the views of the most significant features of the existing historic portion of the building will be preserved, including the bay window on that west facade. So in general, staff does feel that these proposals are appropriate. Zoning relief is justified, and it substantially meets the historic conservation guidelines. I would also note there was a former garage structure, a historic garage structure that was located directly on the property line at a similar location on this site, as shown in the earlier Sanborn maps. So staff does feel that this proposal is appropriate and would recommend the Historic Conservation Board take the following actions based on plans by New Republic Architecture dated April 7th, 2020. The approval for the hillside review for a rear yard setback of 5 feet short of the required 25 feet. Approval of a dimensional variance of, 2.26 feet. That should be for a proposed fence and wall height of 8.26 feet along Auburn Avenue in excess of the 6-foot limit. Approval of the dimensional variance of 45% for a proposed wall opacity of 95% along Walker Street. And staff recommends approval of the certificate of appropriateness for 1947 Auburn Avenue, including any revisions submitted for permit subject to staff review and approval, with the condition that the building permits must be issued within 2 years of the decision date or the COA shall expire.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. We do have several applicants and owners present. If any of you would like to add anything, please unmute and we'll get you sworn in.
Yes, I would like to add something.
Yes, I would.
Uh,
Chair, this is,
just owners and applicants right now. We'll get to public comment.
I understand, but I am counsel for Ugochi Nichukwe. I've discussed this in advance with your counsel. I would like the ability to cross-examine Mr. Owen. I expect I know what the answer will be, but for the purpose of creating a record, I have to make that request.
Mr.
Sure.
Sirki?
Sure. To the chair, to Mr. Burke, there is no place in the rules that allows for cross-examination of government officials. And so it would be my recommendation to the board to not allow that to happen.
Okay, so we will proceed with the comments from the applicants and owners, having that been stated in the record.
Madam Chair, would you please, for the record, follow what Mr. Sturkey has suggested and deny my request?
To the chair, I don't think there's anything wrong with denying his request on the record officially. I think that's perfectly fine.
The chair moves to deny the request of counsel for the neighbor. Is there a second?
Second.
I will call the roll. Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Weiss, Mr. Sunderman,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Voss.
Abstain.
I think we lost Mr. Zelasco.
I'm here, I think.
Oh, sorry. Now you're there. I'm not sure why I didn't see you at first, Bob. Mr. Zelasco.
Could you repeat the motion again, please?
The motion is to deny the attorney's request to cross-examine the staff.
Thank you. Aye.
The chair votes aye. Okay.
I was just going to add that and I think you're aware of this, Ms. Chair, but Mr. Burke is allowed to cross-examine the applicant and the applicant's witnesses.
Yes, but I believe we still go applicant first, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, applicant and owner, if you would like to add anything, please unmute and we'll get you sworn in as a group here.
I would like to speak. I'm the ultimate owner of the property.
Sure. Do we still have Mr. Colby with us?
I'm here.
Have Mr. Colby and Mr. Howard both raise their right hand and answer out loud. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth?
And Ms. Lennon.
And
Ms.
Ms.
Lennon?
Lennon. Yeah.
Do you all solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Okay, who would like to go first?
Graham, if you want to speak first, and then I can go after that.
Well, really, we're here to answer any questions. We've had an opportunity to work with staff to kind of address staff concerns. So I think, Jared, you go ahead and say what you got, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect. Great. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Jared Howard, and I am the ultimate owner of 1947 Auburn Avenue. As the board may recall from previous iterations, 1947 Auburn was originally built as a single family residence, but was converted at one point into a nonprofit corporate headquarters and had fallen into significant disrepair. I purchased that property in connection with my partner, and we've been renovating it for some time. The property is being renovated into a single family residence. Again, it's going to be a 4-bedroom, 4.5 bath property. And, our goal has always been to really restore this to the beautiful, historic and majestic property that it has always been. I know Doug spoke about this a little bit earlier, but I do just want to point out, because it's not something that we had discussed at the prior hearing, but there was a historic carriage house on the property. It's shown in both the 1891 and the 1950 Sanborn map, and the carriage house is of similar size to what we're proposing here. So there is historic precedent for it. And I'll note that in the Sanborn maps, it also shows that that historic structure was either very close or on top of the property line for the property. Here, obviously, our proposal has moved the carriage house about 5 feet to give some relief to the neighboring landowner so that she can still get some light and air and space between her property. I will also just say, I know that there was some discussion historically, and the neighboring owner would really like to see this reduced to a 2-bay garage. I would note that I have talked with my real estate agent. I've also done some inspection into values of property, and my understanding is that a 2-car garage instead of a 3-car garage would substantially impair the value of the property and would make a material difference to it. Which is why I would like to continue to have that option. And speaking very briefly to the objections received from the owner of the property at 1943 Auburn Avenue, I will note that there was objections to the fence, particularly the fact that the fence is to be constructed out of wood and is to be contemporary in nature. I would note that that is actually compliant with the Mount Auburn historic guidelines. It specifically calls out different materials, and wood is one of them that it recommends being used. And actually, the guidelines specifically say that fencing should be contemporary in nature. That's in the guidelines. And, more specifically to the nature of the owner of 1943 Auburn Avenue and her objections, really the objection is that she's concerned about the light that she's going to get into her windows. We did discuss this a number of times with her, and we did try to reach a compromise on this. We've increased the setback by 2.5 feet to try to give her some more space and to really alleviate those concerns. But unfortunately, we just haven't been able to reach a compromise on it. She's not willing to accept anything that's other than, a reduction in size of the garage to a 2-car bay. And so unfortunately, we've just not been able to resolve those issues despite our best efforts to do so. We did adjust other elements of our designs, I will note, to be consistent with other concerns that she had. She had taken objection to one of the windows on the structure. And so we actually removed that window, again, just trying to find a reasonable solution to this. But unfortunately, again, we're not able to reach a compromise after working with the neighbor. And then again, to Doug's point earlier, the 25-foot setback, as I understand it, is only required because the carriage house is to be connected by a narrow breezeway, a covered breezeway that attaches the garage to the property. And if we were to remove that breezeway, the 25-foot setback would not apply. We would like to keep the breezeway if possible, but we're always open to removing the breezeway so that the 25-foot setback would not apply. So with that being said, I'm happy to answer any questions or discuss the property or the development of the property in further detail, but we're just looking to get this finished and have a beautiful house consistent with what the house was historically.
Mr. Burke, would you like to cross-examine this witness now or wait for all of the applicants to speak?
No, this is fine. I'm happy to do it witness by witness. Mr. Howard, first of all, can you explain why it wasn't until 2 weeks ago that this project was submitted under the hillside requirements?
Mr. Burke, I'm not aware of the specific hillside requirements. I know that you raised them during the process, and I know Doug Owens has updated the materials, but I can't answer your question, sir.
You don't disagree that it is in the hillside district?
I mean, Mr. Burke, you're asking me for a legal opinion. I'm not here as a legal expert. So unfortunately, if you would like to ask that of somebody with knowledge who can answer that question, but unfortunately, I'm not that person.
Can you tell me, Mr. Howard, what your basis is for concluding that if the garages were not connected to the house, you could have a setback as small as 3 feet?
Mr. Burke, that's in Mr. Owen's report. And so I'm relying on the report. And I think it's very clear in there that without the breezeway, it would be a 3 feet setback. But again, it's not really necessarily the setback that your client has an issue with. It's the views that she wants. And so she really doesn't want this to be a 3-car garage, despite the fact that there's a 9-car garage right down the street. So I apologize that we've not been able to reach a compromise on it, but I'm relying on the report.
Mr. Howard, I want to keep this as brief as possible, but I'd ask that you answer the question. Now, how big is the footprint of the 3 garages?
I can't tell you. I can't tell you, Mr. Burke. I don't know.
How tall are the 3 garages?
Again, Mr. Burke, I don't know, but it's in the report.
And you're not familiar then with 1421-01 of the zoning code, upon which Mr. Owen apparently relies to say if it wasn't detached, it could only be 3 feet. The setback could only be 3 feet.
Sir, I'm relying on the comments from staff and in the zoning report. I'm not a legal expert in this area.
Do you think your architects are aware of what the setback requirements are?
Sir, you'd have to ask them.
Then I shall. And I presume you are not aware. Mr. Owen also made the point that, well, having 3 garages there will eliminate the existing parking area, and it will be better than the beat up parking area that's there. You saw that kind of an argument made in his report as well?
I mean, sir, his report is his report. It's his report.
And again, you're not aware of the requirement in the Hillside guidelines that say specifically in 1433-19 sub F that all previous surfaces remaining after completion of construction must be landscaped in trees, shrubs, grass, and so on.
Sir, I don't understand your point, but I believe Mr. Owen shared with you that the expectation is that after construction of the garage, the back asphalt would be transitioned into a grassy yard area with landscaping. And again, I would just note for you that according to the Sanborn maps, this is consistent with the historical use of the property. There was a carriage house of similar size and character right on the property line.
How do you know that was a carriage house?
I mean, it's not a masonry structure according to the Sanborn map. It's a wooden structure.
So you have no idea whether or not there was living space in that carriage house?
I do not know if there was. I do not know if there was living space in the carriage house or not. No.
And in fact, you propose, or your applicant proposes, that in the April 5th, 2023 letter from Lindsay Lennon, that it would be a 2-story carriage house addition consisting of 3-car garage and a studio apartment above. You are proposing living space above the garages, correct?
So no, that's not correct. And to be clear, there are no intentions to convert the 2nd floor studio space into actual living space. It could be storage space, or alternatively, we could eliminate it, but we're not looking to add additional living space. We're not seeking any approvals to add plumbing or electrical to make that a habitable space as a residence. No.
Then why did your application say it would be a studio apartment above?
I mean, sir, all I can speak to is my intentions. Obviously, that may be a typo in the letter. It was originally described as a studio, but it's never intended to be a living space. If anything, it would be storage space. We're not seeking any approvals to make it additional living space or an ancillary residential unit.
And you're not suggesting that these variances you are seeking is necessary, because without them, there would be no viable economic use of the property, are you?
I'm suggesting that without these variances, it would have a substantial detrimental effect to the property value. Yes.
That's not the question I asked. You're not suggesting that it would eliminate all viable economic use of the property, are you?
It will not eliminate all economic viable use, but will substantially damage the value of the property.
Are you suggesting that there must be a 3-car garage there because it is necessary in the interest of historic conservation?
As discussed, the carriage house that has been proposed is consistent with the historic property and the Sanborn maps in and of themselves. So I would say that building this carriage house would restore it closer to the consistent historic use of the property than it is currently. And that a 2-car garage in smaller scope would actually provide for.
No other questions at this time.
Thank you. Who would like to speak next on behalf of the applicant?
So I'll just add to the question of the carriage house. I'm looking at the historic Sanborn map from 1904. It is listed as a 1.5-story structure. It's also listed as a frame building. Typically, when we see those come across, those are in our work here in Over the Rhine or Mount Auburn. Those are generally accessory structures, just like what we're proposing, usually a carriage house kind of an arrangement. And then the architectural plans show don't show any living space on that sort of second floor up above the attic. And there's no kitchens, there's no plumbing, there's none of that kind of stuff. So it's really just meant to be an attic space.
Mr. Colby, can you tell us, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have jumped in.
Go ahead.
Mr. Colby, can you tell us what the size of the footprint of the 3-car garage will be?
It is, I think, 30 by 28. It's about 930 square feet, I believe.
And the height of the
I don't know that off the top of my head, but it's probably basically a story plus to the midpoint of the gable roof, so maybe 15, 18 feet.
If I may, it is 23.5 feet tall.
There you go.
And if the garages were detached from the main home in order to take advantage of this 3-foot setback, it would be an accessory structure, correct?
Correct.
So are you familiar with the provisions of the zoning code which provide for the 3-foot setback in 14? Looking for the correct citation, I apologize.
I can't cite that for.
All right, well, let me ask
but-
it this way, because it's 1421-01, which in sub F, I believe it is, says that an accessory structure can have a 3-foot setback if its size under B is less than 800 square feet. And under, that's actually under A. Under E is less than 15 feet. Your 3-car garage, if it were an accessory structure, is bigger than both of those, isn't it?
I would assume so. I'd have to look at that section, but we work with the urban conservator and with the client to design something that meets the client's use.
I understand that, but what we're here on now is zoning relief. It's my belief that the urban conservator is wrong when he created for you the idea that if you separated the garages from the house, you could only have, you could have as little as a 3-foot setback, when that's not what the zoning code provides for a 3-car garage that is the size of what you propose and the height of what you propose. You don't know whether that's accurate or not.
I'm not a zoning code expert. That would be a legal zoning code question.
So you can understand that when I'm denied the right to question the purported zoning code expert for the board, I don't have anybody to ask that question of, do I?
I'm not a lawyer, so that's.
Can you tell me if there are any other examples of a single family home on Auburn Avenue in the Auburn Historic District that has a 3-car garage fronting on Auburn Avenue?
Not off the top of my head, but I wouldn't, I'd have to go look. I know there's a 9-car garage just down the street.
Set back from the street with landscaping in front of it, correct?
I believe so. And where we're placing this carriage house is historically generally where the carriage house was originally.
And when did you say the carriage house was eliminated?
I didn't say that.
What you are calling a historic carriage house?
I didn't say when it was eliminated. I don't know.
Do you have any idea when it was eliminated?
No idea.
Do you have any idea whether it was eliminated long before the historic overlay was placed on Auburn Avenue?
No, I do not.
Can you tell me if there is any other example of a wooden privacy fence along Auburn Avenue in the Auburn Avenue Historic District?
I did not do that investigation. I don't know.
Anybody in your office do that investigation?
No, we did not.
You understand that if we now are going to approve a wooden privacy fence along Auburn Avenue, we're setting a precedent for future wooden privacy fences.
Wooden privacy fences get approved in all manner of historic districts throughout the city.
Why does the Mount Auburn Historic Guidelines specifically say that privacy fences, including stockade fences, are discouraged?
You'd have to ask the person that wrote the guidelines.
You don't dispute the fact that that's what the guidelines say, do you?
I don't know. I don't have the guidelines in front of me.
No other questions of this witness?
Thank you. Ms. Lennon, did you want to add anything?
Not at this time.
Mr. Burke, did you have any questions? I believe she did provide clarity on height previously.
I would like to ask her a couple of questions and to see if she knows and can agree or disagree with my reading of 1421 regarding the setbacks of accessory structures.
Yes, Tim, I believe we had discussed with staff on this ability to eliminate the breezeway. He did mention that we would have to reduce our garage in size to 800 square feet. And that was considered an option, but we would be pushing it closer to your client's property, to that 3-foot. And we did not want to do that. We wanted to maintain the separation that we had offered at the 5-foot setback, including the 3-foot setback of your client's property. So we are 8 feet away from your client's house. And we did not want, sorry.
You also would have had to reduce the height of the 3 garages, wouldn't you?
We were not directed at that time.
Did you discuss this issue with Mr. Colby?
It was Doug and I.
My question is, did you discuss that discussion with Mr. Owen, with Mr. Colby?
It was in passing, yes.
Did you discuss it with the property owner?
we had discussed the option.
So both Mr. Colby and the property owner had some knowledge of the fact that to get that 3-foot setback, you'd have to essentially eliminate presumably one of the garages and reduce the height of the building, correct?
We did not have to reduce the garage itself because we have an extensive stair in the rear of the design as it is proposed today. So in order to reach the square foot maximum, we would only have to remove the stair in the rear and add an attic access ladder. And no, we already did not want any studio apartment above, and I apologize, that word should not have been in my letter.
Are you familiar with any wooden fences along Auburn Avenue, anywhere in the Auburn Avenue Historic District?
I am not familiar, but I have not looked.
No other questions?
Before we move on to public comment, are there any questions or comments from the board for either the applicants or staff?
Of course, I have a question. And maybe Graham, Mr. Colby, you could just clarify. I think Doug answered it, but the drawings are a little confusing. I think erroneously sheets A101, 103 in your set show the existing adjacent building incorrectly. It looks like maybe a line was transposed from, but actually it was a sidewalk line. If you go back to G301, it shows the existing building. Actually, you do G301, or what I was using was the Tim King's drawing that shows the adjacent building to the south, the neighbor's building, kind of in the front of it, kind of midway in the recess of the building that's trying to be rehabilitated. But the other drawings show her structure behind the garage. I just need to know, one, if it looks to me like if the Sanborn map, the windows on the north side of the building were straddling the existing structures that were there. I kind of get the impression from a lot of this conversation that that's what the garage is doing now, but when I look at your floor plan drawings, I'm not convinced that's the case. So I guess, can you confirm or show me where it's confirmed that the garage is actually behind the window that's on the east side of the north face?
I don't think we ever said that, but I'm not exactly totally following you, Mr. Zelasco.
Well, I'm looking at her bill. I mean, one of the concerns was you're asking for relief, a considerable amount of relief in zoning. And my understanding was that if the building remained commercial, they wouldn't really need that relief. The fact that it's going residential creates that situation. So because you're asking for the relief, and in previous comments of the board were lose one of the bays of the garage and you probably get your approval. So I guess between then and now, I'm concerned, if it sounds like, I'm not sure if you were working with the neighbor or not, but if the garage fits in between the two windows on her north elevation, I'm not sure I have a concern. If the building still blocks her easternmost window on the north elevation, then I'm not as likely to approve it. I'm looking at her building. I don't have a footprint of her building, but she's got a garage and then an entrance. So that's not like a big room in the corner, but it is a significant feature of her house that when you come down the stairs, or whatever is behind that little foyer, she's got a view of the park. And if the garage completely blocks that, continues to block that. I'm concerned about that. That's where.
I mean, if we're talking about the foyer window there, I guess is what it would maybe be. That first window on the north side.
Yes.
What I've had concerns with all along is that the property appears to be less than 3 feet to the property line, which per the residential code of Ohio, no windows are permitted in a wall that's closer than 3 feet to a property line. So
it's an existing window, right?
Right, but so.
And the other thing, maybe while you're commenting on, we're in that little space, I apologize, Graham. There's only 20 inches left between the fence and her building, but it looks like, according to your drawing 301, there's an HVAC unit sitting on your client's property.
There's and the southern property has the retaining wall on my client's property.
Okay.
That's why we've kind of tried to hold the proposed carriage house off of the property line even more, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So did you answer my question about whether the garage is actually more east than her window or not?
I think it is more east at this point in time.
I wish the drawings were clearer on that. It would have been helpful for me. And I know that's maybe not your responsibility, but since you're asking for 25 feet of relief from the zoning code, it would have been helpful to see a silhouette of the garage against the building.
Oh, you cut out there.
I said it would have been.
If I may, G301 matches the existing survey that we used for the drawings. So unfortunately, the A series has the existing adjacent building in the wrong location. So yes, it is held slightly east of the adjacent structure.
I didn't catch all that. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
G301 is represented, is traced from the existing survey. So that is the accurate placement of the adjacent building. Unfortunately, it did not translate to the A series correctly.
Okay. So the garage is further east, actually, than the easternmost face of her building.
Yes, by what looks about 1.5 feet.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Could you move the garage back more? Did you get it behind that window and fit it in between her other? I mean, doesn't look to me like that would really affect much of anything.
I would pose that question to our client. I don't think site-wise or architecturally that makes a difference, but that would be a client question. So
well, and I guess that for me, I mean, if you'd have come back and done that, I think you'd have my vote. Otherwise, so I kind of feel like the request was kind of blown off.
I will say, I don't necessarily think it was blown off. I would disagree with that. As I mentioned earlier, we had multiple conversations with the neighbor for 1943 Auburn Avenue, trying to find some type of compromise here. And frankly, there just wasn't one to be had. She's not willing to entertain a 3-car garage under any circumstances. I think the board has got a flavor for the combative nature of her positions based on the cross-examination that you all saw earlier. I don't know, honestly, how much additional space we're talking about needing to push the proposed garage back in order to clear that window. If we're talking that it's another foot or 2 foot, I don't have concerns about that. And if that would alleviate the issue and everybody would be happy, then I don't have a problem with that. I would prefer for the garage not to push back past the exterior wall of the house in the rear yard. But if we push it back, a foot or 2 feet, and that will resolve the issue, I'm happy to do it. But I will say, I don't think that will resolve the very deeply held issues and concerns that the neighbor has, unfortunately. But that is something that I would be willing to entertain as a landowner.
I appreciate it. Hey, Graham, there's
Yeah.
2 windows on her north face. Will a cross section of the garage fit between those 2 windows?
I'm trying to look at it on Google Earth in real time.
That's
It'd be
what I'm staring at, actually.
I don't know that it would fit totally within there. We did not venture onto the neighboring property to measure where windows were or.
No, I get it. But you could count brick or something. I mean,
Yep.
Any other questions or comments at this time from the board for the applicants or staff? We do have some folks signed up for public comment.
And Ms. Chair, I'll just note, according to the rules of procedure, if there is any presentation from Mr. Burke and his client, that we would entertain those before public comment.
Yep, I'm sorry, I misspoke. That was where I was going next. Okay, not hearing any questions, Mr. Burke, I will turn it over to you and your client for any presentation you may have.
I will simply introduce client Yugochi. Struggled to pronounce her last name correctly. Yugochi. I apologize for that. And I'll let her tell you her concerns. I would like to reserve a right when all of the residents, and I think there are only 2 others who may have comments, I'd like to make what would amount to a closing statement. That's all. Yuguchi, you want to?
I'll introduce myself. I don't know if I need to be sworn in.
You do. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed.
Thank you. And thank you guys for the time today. So first, I'm Gochi Wachuku, and I'm the property owner of 143 Auburn Avenue, which is adjacent to the proposed development on 1947 Auburn Avenue. When I bought the property, I was very well aware that 1947 was a historic building and that we were in a historic district. In fact, because 1947 was undergoing construction when I first bought, this was a major factor in my decision on whether to buy the property or not, because I wanted to know what would happen and make sure that whatever is happening is not going to be detrimental to my property value. I, of course, loved that it was a historic building, which in my presumption or my understanding meant that the exterior of the property will be, the house and the grounds will be preserved as is, right? I also love that there are other historic properties in the building. I knew that the Flatiron building was being restored. And in fact, that was the hills and the historic nature of the neighborhood was a major reason I actually ended up buying in Mount Auburn, and specifically on Short Auburn Avenue, which was our street. The property owner of 147 claims that they've been trying to work with me on this. That is an absolute lie. Post the last hearing, the thing that they built a spike fence and they cut down a tree, and that's what prompted the conversation to begin with. They cut a tree down that's on the property line. During that time, I did offer several potential options, including the ones that we discussed at the last historic board. Talked about potential of them turning the garage sideways with the garage, the doors facing me, which will allow them to build a 3-car garage as is. We talked an option of potential 2-car tandem, and so 1 and 2 car that allows them to still build a 3-car garage. There's several configurations which they could build a 3-car garage if they needed the 3-car garage, whether the large lot that they had. At that time, I even offered them moving the garage back where the carriage house, previous carriage house they're pointing to that was on the lot line. It was set back beyond the building, the windows of my building. So it was set back further back into the lot, which was an option that I even suggested and offered them. They pretty much ignored. They'll tell me that they're going to get back to me, and they never get back to me. So the only discussion we had with me was after they submitted the hearing, and I attended the pre-hearing, and that's when they pretended that they were going to talk to me, but they really didn't have a conversation. They had a conversation with my attorney and basically said that they're going to continue with the plans as is. So they haven't made any significant effort to actually work with me or hear my concerns. In fact, they've been completely inconsiderate, and I think they just think that my concerns are not valid. The window that you pointed, I think one of the board members pointed to, is facing the park directly. The wall that's going to be built is going to block the basically turn that park view into a wall view of their garage, which is what I said, if you're going to build it at the location that you're insisting on building it, you need to set it back further back, that I still have light, I still have a view, and I still have pretty much my property value is not significantly damaged, because versus the beauty of my end unit with lovely views, now I have basically a view of a garage wall, which is the concerns I shared with the applicant previously before their survey board, and post the one conversation that they had after they cut down the tree on the property line. That's what's even triggered the conversation. They didn't reach out to me to try to work out what designs will be sufficient. I'm also opposed to the wood fence. The fence they're trying to build by taking down the retaining wall that's in between our properties. The retaining wall is not solely on their property, is not solely on my property, is on the property line. So they're trying to bring down the retaining wall and build a wooden fence, an ugly wooden fence blocking both our buildings. I'm opposed to that. There's no wooden fence in the Mount Auburn, in the historic district. It is out of character. All of us, including me and the park next door, we all have the 50% transparency, the metal fence that's very consistent with the neighborhood, that doesn't block the views of any of the properties or the adjacent properties in the neighborhood. They insist that the fence is behind, but you could see the fence very clearly, both from Walker and from on Sycamore and on Auburn. So I'm not really sure why how this doesn't obstruct the views in our neighborhood. I'll end there, but I just wanted to share that I have been very considerate, and it's that the reason why their codes is to protect everybody else, not just the one owner. So when I bought, it shouldn't be the burden of me to now have to live with the building that's not up to code, that's going to devalue my property.
Thank you. We do have a few others signed up from the public, so we'll proceed with those if that's the correct order, Mr. Sturkey.
It is, yes.
Madam Chair, if I could just interject, is there the ability to cross-examine members of the public who are testifying?
No,
not unless you're an attorney.
Well, I am an attorney.
But he's not playing an attorney today.
Yeah, no. That's no. You will have a chance at rebuttal. You'll be able to respond to some of her comments, but you cannot cross-examine her.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have Tiffany Ann Brown Crabby. Sorry if I've mangled that. I'm doing that a lot today. If you'd like to add something, let's get you sworn in, please.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Ms. Brown, if you could raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
What would you like to tell us?
Can you say that again?
What would you like to tell us?
I just wanted to ask, my main concern is, I moved in 2017, and the property in and of itself has had very little work done to it. And as of right now, they have fencing that has been up for over a year that isn't being managed very well. In addition to the fact, the garage that they're referring to, I just don't agree that a 3-car garage is. I just support my neighbor in saying they have other options than the design that they're proposing to still accommodate their needs. Personally, I would appreciate them finishing the house. It's going further into disrepair. I'm very concerned about that. It's adversely affecting our property value. The other garage they keep referring to is not, I just want to correct, that is not a 9-car garage. That is an incorrect statement. I actually own one of the lots in that garage, and I can attest that that is not correct. And the fencing, if you go through this neighborhood, we do not have fencing that looks the way. The problem is their house is the beginning of our street, and it's at this time it's an eyesore, and I don't understand how they've been allowed to let this building continue to exist the way that it has for 6 years now. I mean, I'm frankly disappointed, and I feel this is just another way for them to delay dealing with the existing property itself, and I'm frankly a little fed up. And that the designs in and of itself, they keep saying this 3-car garage is necessary, and it's not. They can do it a different way and still accomplish their needs. So I have a lot of problems with what they're proposing as far as how it looks and represents our neighborhood. And that's pretty much it.
We also have Susan Bethel signed up. Would you like to add anything?
Yes,
Yeah. If you could raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. So I also submitted a written statement. I don't know if that was received and read, but I do agree, like I bought my home in 2015 and nothing has been done to the exterior of that building. It's noticeably deteriorated this whole time. I feel like that building and the Flatiron are the gateway to our community. And and one of the reasons I bought here was because of the historic nature of the buildings and the neighborhood. The Flatiron has been beautifully restored in less time, right? It's been like the last 2 or 3 years it took for them to completely restore it, and it looks gorgeous. And nothing has been done to the exterior of this other building. When there has been work on it, they've been, the construction debris is blown all over our neighborhood. They've been very inconsiderate of all of us. I also disagree. I agree with the garage, bank of garages that they're describing as an example are well set back. You don't even see them when you look at down the street. It's not a detriment to the look and feel of the neighborhood. Again, garages are at a premium here, so any garage is a huge benefit. A 3-garage, car garage, as they said, could be accommodated differently if they really feel the need for it. Really, I think they're just trying to get as much money as they possibly can. And they don't really care about the historical nature of the neighborhood or the building, but that's just kind of my take on the way they've acted.
Thank you.
Excuse, can I apologize. Susan brought up something that I wanted to add. They keep saying that
briefly.
Yes, I keep hearing concerns around the historical nature, and I do want to reiterate what she said. Their construction has been extremely hit or miss and not very well kept. Frankly, the whole situation is frustrating to many, many neighbors in the neighborhood. So I really want to stress that if we're talking about the historical nature and preservation, I don't think that they are I don't think they're living up to that commitment. And that's all I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Starkey, rebuttal first or attorney's closing?
Yeah, so now that we're through public comment, we can go to rebuttal, where the applicant can rebut or refute any arguments or contentions that were made in opposition to his application, and then we go into closing statements, and we'll start closing statements with Mr. Burke, and the applicant will have the final word.
Thank you. Would any of the applicant or owner representatives like to rebut anything that was mentioned in the preceding comment?
Just very briefly, Madam Chair, I'll start with the wood fence because I do think that is probably the simplest item on the list. And that is just to point you simply to, and the board, to the historic guidelines for the Auburn Historic District that specifically says under the subsection walls and fences retain the original. It says specifically new fences should be of wood, iron, or stone and should be simple and contemporary in design. So the guidelines very clearly say wood and contemporary, which is what we are proposing with respect to the fence. With respect to the garage, I mean, I think Susan said it best, garages come at a premium. That is why a 3-car garage makes the property much more valuable. And I'm not looking to just turn a quick buck here. I intend to move into this property. This isn't about making more money. It's about the value of the property. We've put more than $400,000 into it. We care deeply about restoring the character and the nature of the property. And that's what we want to do. If any of these applicants had actually been inside the house, they would be able to see the scale and scope of the renovation that has taken place and the features of it. And the reality is none of them have been inside, so none of them know that. So when they're speaking without any knowledge, and they're speculating about what they think it is. They're speaking to the fact that we've not completed the project, and we haven't completed the project because we need this approval to do the garage. And just in closing, one last point that I would say is when we originally purchased the property, you know, the property was actually subdivided into 4 lots, and it was very clear that the intention was to try to tear down at one point the historic building and build similar row houses. If we would not have consolidated the lots for this garage, which is what the city told us we needed to do, we would have been able to have built another townhouse right on top of the property line. It was already zoned for that. It was already split. And the only reason why that didn't happen was because we bought it and consolidated it to build this garage. And you know, at the end of the day, I think we've been incredibly respectful of the neighbors. I think we have tried our best to get this project completed. I think we have given up an extra 2.5 feet of space, and we have worked with them to try to come up with a solution. And unfortunately, again, this combative tone that you've heard today is unfortunately why we just haven't been able to get there. And it's truly unfortunate, but we would love to finish this project. We have the capital to do it. We want to finish it and have this house just be a beautiful historic testament to the district.
Is there any additional applicant rebuttal? Not, I will go back to Mr. Burke for a closing statement.
I will be brief, and I appreciate the board's time. I know you've been here a long time today. There are a number of reasons why the variances as currently applied for should not be approved. One is how large the variances are that are being sought. Mr. Zelasco indicated it once that they want an 80% setback variance. And the board, the last time they were here about 18 months ago, made it very clear that the way to resolve this was to get rid of one of the bays of the garage. And you heard from my client that she's suggested to them alternatives to how you could end up with space to park 3 cars in garages there, either by turning the 3 garages or by having one of the garages be a deeper garage that allowed for 2 cars to be parked in that garage. The board gave good guidance. My client gave them good guidance. It's not correct to say she never tried to find a solution. The fact of the matter is that the applicant, frankly, is being pretty stubborn here, and he's no hero for having simply added 2 feet to the variance. The variance on the setback should not be granted. It doesn't fit either within the very special justifications that you are empowered to grant variances for. We established in my aggressive cross-examination of the owner that he's not claiming that without the variances, there's not a viable economic use for the property. That's one of the reasons why you could grant a variance. The only reason left is under 1435-054A. The variance is, quote, necessary and appropriate in the interests of historic conservation. The question is it necessary for historic conservation that he must have a 3-car garage on the site? And I would argue that there's been no evidence that it is necessary in the interests of historic conservation that he has to have a 3-car garage. The fence is another issue. If you look at page A101 of the plans, you get a little picture of the fence. If you review the historic guidelines for the Auburn Historic District, it in a number of cases raves about the benefit of the wrought iron or modern equivalents of wrought iron fences that are not opaque, that are see-through, and that fit within the district. This fence, which staff suggests is 95% opaque, requires not only a variance for its height on top of the wall, but it requires an opacity variance of some 45% because it can only have a 50% opacity under the code. They want a 95% opacity. And frankly, while I agree with what Mr. Howard has said, that the guidelines offer several alternatives for the materials that may be used in a fence, I would say again that you cannot find a wooden fence on Auburn Avenue. You cannot find a fence on Auburn Avenue that is 95% opaque. And the guidelines also discuss the fact that fences should not interfere with the view of the historic building. The best view of this historic building is from Hopkins Park directly across the street, a beautiful little park. Fence is going to be blocking the view of that because the applicant wants privacy. The guidelines specifically discourage privacy fences. And yet that's what they want to put up there instead of doing something more in keeping with the historic fences in the district. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to have a closing statement?
Just very briefly, there were allegations made today that I'm just looking to make a quick buck on this property, right? That was the exact verbiage that was used. And the reality of it is, if that were the case, I wouldn't have consolidated the lots. I would have built a row house, townhouse, something else instead of renovating this majestic historic house back to its original character and nature, and trying to add a similar carriage house to what existed historically, which we can see from the Sanborn maps. I appreciate everybody's time today. I know this has been incredibly long, and I apologize for the antagonistic tone of this. I wish it could have been resolved a different way, but I do thank the board for their time today.
Questions or comments from board members? Don't all speak at once. I will also entertain motions if there are no questions or comments.
It appears to me that there are alternatives that would decrease the impact on the neighbor, and might have some impact on the rear yard, which I understand has value and appeal. We are being asked for a very significant variance on the setback, and I'm not comfortable with it the way it's being proposed. And whereas I think the fence is very attractive, I don't think it's particularly appropriate for that space between the garage and the house. So that's my take on it. Whether that to maximize the value, you have to do a double tandem or push that garage substantially back into the rear yard. There are alternatives that would not have I don't think would have a dramatic impact. And so that's where I am right now.
Other feedback?
It seems as though that this is basically, or not exactly the same, but close to the same question we had the last time they came in. And we gave them some ideas of what they could do. And while I applaud Mr. Howard for the work he's done and the money he's put into this property to maintain it, I am concerned about the neighbors, and I think there are ways to maintain the historic aspect of this building and make it more compatible with the neighbors' wishes.
I'm very conflicted right now, and I have no idea which way I would vote, but I'm not leaning towards approval.
I feel like there's room for improvement.
That having been said, I will make a motion to deny both the zoning relief and the certificate of appropriateness as laid out by staff.
Mr. Sturkey, do we want to provide additional options?
That is, completely up to you. I know that the applicant has sat through a couple of these where we've tabled today so that they could work on revisions. But again, there is the option to move forward with the denial and try to appeal this to the Zoning Board of Appeals as well. That's really, I think, something that is a question for the applicant.
So can I ask a procedural question? If we table now, we come back in a couple weeks, or what's the distance between when we can be before the body again versus denial? Can we come before the body again, or do we have to go to the appeal board?
Yeah, so if you were to table today and make revisions, they would need to be submitted to the urban conservator. And as soon as the urban conservator could come up with a new staff report, we could likely get this back in front of the board. If this were to be denied today and go in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, that process. Cassandra could probably talk about the timeline on that a little bit more accurately than I could, but I think that would be what, Cassandra, at least 6 weeks or longer.
Yes, I mean, they'd have 30 days to file the appeal and then perfect it. So it would be about a 5 to 6 week process.
If you were denied and then wanted to change the plans or update the plans, you could come back in front of this board as long as it's a different proposal than the one that's currently in front of the board. If that's what you were getting at, Graham, on that.
Substantially different, I think, is the operative word there. Is that right? And then, so if I'm hearing right, tabling it could get us back in front of the body sooner than an appeal.
Well, to be
So,
clear, you wouldn't be coming back in front of us if we deny it. You'd be going to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Correct.
The application as is would have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And yes, I think tabling it could potentially get you, to the finish line quicker if this board were to approve the revised plans. But again, if it's denied and you change it, that's sort of another path. You'd have to come back through the application process, and that would be like starting from square one. So I think if getting back in front of this board with revisions is your goal, then tabling would likely be the quickest option.
Can I ask a point of clarification based on the feedback from the board today? I'm sorry, I don't want to prolong this, but I substantively, with respect to the individual legal standards, there's the variances that we're seeking with respect to the relief, but then there's the question of appropriateness. And it sounds like what I'm hearing from the board is they don't want to grant the variances, and they don't think that the 3-car garage as proposed is appropriate. What I'm really wanting to understand is it the character of the carriage house, the way that it's drawn, the way that the architecture of the carriage house is that's at issue, or is it the simple fact that it's a 3-car carriage house?
I can't speak for the other. Can I
go?
Am I allowed to talk? I can't speak for the other members. It looks like there's about 30 feet between the 2 windows on the north side of her house. I don't know how high this thing is because there's no dimensions on the drawings. To get my vote, either need to lose a bay in the garage and create more distance between the 2 buildings, or relocate the garage so that it's between those 2 windows and doesn't obstruct her northeast and northwest view. And it looks like you could do it. I mean, I don't think the design would be compromised. I think that's kind of what I expected to happen this time. Honestly, I'm a little annoyed that more progress wasn't made on that, but that would probably get my vote, if that helps.
So
Again, what the piece that I'm really looking for is so it sounds like it has nothing to do with the style and the style fitting within the historic character of the district. Is that a fair say? The 3-car garage, the 3 bays, sounds like that's the problem as opposed to the historic style.
Well, I will echo Mr. Zelasco. I speak only for myself. I actually think the style is quite elegant, and if it were not 5 feet away from the next property, I think the design is beautiful, and I think it is appropriate. I may not feel that way about the fencing, but the style of the garage I find very attractive. It is the fact that we're so close to the other property and we're being asked for the 80% variance on that setback. That is my issue.
I would agree with that.
Mr. Owen, could you clarify too, is there what is for the fence, regardless of the style? There is a transparency standard that they would need relief from as well.
50%.
No, that's only on the Walker Street side. The Auburn Avenue fence can be 100% solid according to the zoning regulations. 100% solid, 6 feet tall at its current location.
So one other point of clarification, if I may, in the interest of advancing the design and all of us getting to dinner at some reasonable hour, so it sounds like there was previous discussions maybe before we were involved about a different configuration where there was some tandem things going on, tandem parking garage or garage going on. But so I'm hearing that proximity to the adjacent property owner is the most paramount thing, and that really the footprint, the 800 square foot footprint kind of threshold isn't so much the hurdle if we can design it appropriately to get it a little more away from 1943. Is that a fair statement? I'm just trying to look for a solution, and I've got a few ideas in my head that I want to talk over with our client at some point.
That would certainly start to address the concerns I have.
I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah,
And echo that.
just to be clear, I mean, the board can't promise anything in the future. Each of these board members speaks for themselves, and they certainly can't design the project for you. So I would take all of that feedback. We'll have a copy of this video that you can review and listen to their feedback again if you'd like. But just want to be very careful here that we're not telling you what's going to necessarily get you passed. It's just feedback.
Yeah, I'm just looking for sort of a little bit more guardrails.
Mr. Howard, are you open to tabling and coming back?
Yes.
I move that Madam Chair, I move that we table for 30 days.
I withdraw my second.
Do we need to do anything to withdraw Mr. Sunderman's previous motion?
I will withdraw my previous motion.
I move that we table the matter for rehearing at a later date.
Second.
Okay, I will call the roll. Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Sunderman,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Voss,
Yes.
Mr. Zelasco.
Yes.
The chair votes aye. Okay, so please work with staff to get back on the agenda, and we will hear more from you soon.
Thank you.
Are there any other agenda items for today?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, I will entertain a motion regarding adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.